Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Life Coach Live. My name is Paul Heron, and I'm thrilled to be here today with my co-host Tyler Nouns for another inspiring, entertaining talk about a topic that's close to our hearts today. How are you getting on today, Tyler?
Yeah, so far so good, Paul. I know it's a little later in the day where you're at, but for me it's 10, just after 10 o'clock.
Awesome. Yes, it is a bit later. Still, I managed to have my dinner before I started today, so here we go, bright as a button. So today we want to dive into a topic that has been on my mind lately. Over the past few weeks, we've spoken in a fair bit of detail about the inner work that is required for us to be able to identify our vision and to start allowing ourselves to manage our emotions, our thoughts, and our actions towards taking action towards making our vision a reality. One of the things that's come up for me in terms of thinking about this conversation is just the idea of what motivates us to take the actions that we intend to take. And I think, at a basic level, everything we do is motivated by, in some ways, the avoidance of pain or the pursuit of pleasure. But I think it's really interesting to spend some time thinking through the types of motivations that we experience. For example, a couple of things we want to mention and talk about today are the distinction between intrinsic motivations and extrinsic motivations. I am always sort of fascinated thinking through, what makes us, or what pulls us in the direction of doing the things that are important to us. I know even from my own personal point of view, there are certain activities and actions that, within themselves, don't necessarily have any power to be able to pull us in a particular direction. But once they are tied to other situations or other scenarios, the way we think about these things can completely change. One thing that springs to mind for me is the idea of keeping our house nice and tidy. Now, my house is obviously pretty tidy most of the time, but when we are hosting a party or a function at our place, all of a sudden we've got this motivation to go that extra mile, to do a spring clean, to be clearing out things we haven't touched for the last 12 months. And I find it fascinating just thinking through what is it that gives us this extra burst of energy in terms of doing some of these things. In that particular case, it's potentially an extrinsic motivation. We've got people coming over to the house. We've got worries and thoughts about being judged and comparing ourselves to others. But where I find this really interesting is how we can apply some of that motivation to the inner work that we need to be doing. And as a coach, a lot of the work that we're doing is by ourselves. We're moving away from being an employee in a lot of cases where we've got extrinsic motivation sort of pulling and pushing us in particular directions to get results for somebody else. We're now completely responsible for everything that we need to accomplish. And that brings with it a completely different set of motivations that we need to work with in order for us to be able to do the things that are required for us to achieve that vision that we've been talking about. I'm interested to just give you a moment here, Tyler, just to allow you the chance to sort of talk through what's coming up for you on this topic.
Yeah, okay. I think you raised a lot of interesting points, and I've contemplated. You kind of went into more detail in your Monday Mindset email newsletter that you sent out that I'm a happy recipient of, and I want to acknowledge you for being consistent with that. Every Monday, an email newsletter goes out, and they're all great. They're all good stuff. And so, having read that and understanding how we are influenced either externally, there's something outside of ourselves that's causing us to act or to do or to respond or to behave in a particular way. And then there's the intrinsic motivation, where we're kind of inspired from within because it resonates deeper with us. And so, it's interesting relating this back for me. How I kind of started to look at this is we talked about the first power of emotion and how it is kind of the underlying causal power, which is often we're not even conscious of unless we kind of inquire into it, unless we do a bit of contemplating. So, for example, what you shared there about having guests come over, and I've subscribed to this. I often joke anytime we have guests, I say that's the best thing about having a bunch of people over is how clean the house gets beforehand. And so, but it's interesting how there's a duality to it, because we feel better about ourselves. We feel more secure about ourselves. We feel less embarrassed or ashamed about ourselves if we have a clean appearance, which is, you could say we feel better about ourselves, which is a positive thing, but we're afraid of, being embarrassed. So it's like there's this dual motive. There's a positive reason for doing it and a negative reason for doing it, despite the fact that it's an extrinsic motive, that it's something outside of ourselves. That's kind of my little take on it. And I like that analogy. I could, with the cleaning the house, Paul, it is something that I've definitely experienced myself around the house here, and have joked about even for like a week ago, because we had a big Thanksgiving dinner. We had, there's 12 or 13 people here, and we had to make sure that everything was tickety-boo.
Absolutely. And, I love, that explanation that you just gave there. Awesome. I love it. And there are pros and cons to these motivations that push us towards doing the things that we're wanting to do, because the same motivations could be pulling us away from doing something that's in line with our goals. And I think it's really important to just be aware of what it is that motivates us. And as individuals, we might find that there are some slight differences in what motivates us. And there's not necessarily any right or wrong with the things that do motivate us. But I think it's really important to become as aware as we can of what those motivations are and what is most important to us. And I think if we take it back to thinking through what our vision is and what it is that we're wanting to create, most of us as coaches, and I guess particularly if you've been listening to our content up to date, it's obviously very much focused on the inner work that's required to allow us to be able to start taking steps towards our vision. And at that outer layer of purpose, I think for most of us, it's going to be an intrinsic motivation that's pushing and pulling us towards that vision that we want to create. There is a power in it, I guess. It's a desire for us to give and contribute back. For most of us, it's that willingness or want to be the best version of ourselves, to live to our potential, and to grow to be this version of ourselves that where we're able to contribute and give to the wider, broader community. And I know for me, and I'm pretty sure for you, Tyler, that plays a big part. But I think, looking at what's required for us to be able to make that vision a reality as a whole, I think is a really interesting thing. Just focusing on the intrinsic side for a moment, there are a number of things that sort of come to mind for me. And I think a lot of it comes back to that idea of giving ourselves permission to look after ourselves, to put our mask on first, to look after ourselves physically, mentally, take care of ourselves. I think that is something that can be really, really powerful in terms of developing a motivation to allow you to put yourself first. I think that in itself is something that some coaches potentially have trouble with. As a coach, we potentially have come from a background of wanting to care and to take care of others above and beyond our own needs. And again, just thinking about that, that scenario, for example, if that is something that you can relate to, if you are able to step back and to be able to sort of objectively look at what is driving that thought pattern or that pattern that might be playing out, is it the intrinsic desire to be that best version of yourself, or is it more external validation? And again, there's no right or wrong. I think it's just the more we can become aware of who we are and what drives us, the more we're able to consciously start taking steps in the direction that we really want to be growing towards. I'm interested to go just shoot it back to you, Tyler. What comes up for you when you think intrinsic motivations and how they apply to the challenges that a lot of coaches who are starting out or setting off on their journey are facing?
Well, a few things come up for me, actually, and from the context that we're talking about, you're absolutely right. There's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of becoming self-aware and observing within yourself what is motivating you, so that you can become more conscious. And but from an intrinsic standpoint, I think the fears are flipped from an intrinsic motivation compared to an extrinsic motivation. And so I think a lot of our motivation, if we don't really examine it, is we're kind of more conditioned from an extrinsic. And I think what happens is there's a lot of pleasure seeking as a result, especially younger. And, you touched on avoiding the pain. And I think what happens is that a lot of the pleasure seeking, actually, if you're not aware of what's happening, you're on the path to pain. It eventually leads to pain. And so I think that the transformation from having an extrinsic motivation to an intrinsic, primarily an intrinsic. Of course, we're going to have the extrinsic. Of course, we're part of this world and we've got responsibilities and family. But what we're talking about isn't really that. What we're talking about is something deeper. And that when we start to look within ourselves, because intrinsic means internally, at what is actually inherent within us, what is ours, what belongs to us. Like the slide says, And this was the definition on Wikipedia: belonging naturally, essential to who and what we are. And again, it gets back to identity. But I would say that from that place, from the inside out, is where the real transformation occurs and the empowerment occurs. And what I was saying earlier, though, the fear flips, right? From an extrinsic standpoint, we do things because out of fear, like the guests are coming. Oh, I don't want to, be embarrassed when the guests come. So, but from an intrinsic standpoint, when we start stepping out of our comfort zone because we are being guided and driven by an intrinsic vision, right? Our mission, our identity, our beingness, the fear now is related to the extrinsic. It's related to, I'm not used to having being totally driven by intrinsic. How will it externally be received? And so we're afraid, we're kind of reluctant to step outside and to be one of your beautiful words that you use sometimes, Paul, that I love, is the word authentic, to be our true self. And I'm a real, if anyone's watched these videos so far, if I'm voting for, which side to win, I would say intrinsic. And within the intrinsic, all of the extrinsic is dealt with in the best way possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, a fantastic explanation there, Tyler. And, for me, what's coming out of this conversation today, as well as the previous conversations we've had, is, when we've got fears, doubts, worries that are playing with our motivation to get the things done that we know we should be doing. This question of motivation and how we can give ourselves the best shot to actually step out the comfort zone and do the things that we know are required to take us that next step towards our vision. They're kind of assuming that the goal posts or the vision, the target you've already done the work to establish what that looks like. And, I think for a lot of us, what we're conditioned to do, I love the way that you described that, Tyler, what we've been conditioned to do is to have that goalpost provided to us. We want people to tell us exactly what we need to be doing. And then, we want the comfort of having the excuse up your sleeve that, it didn't work out because, this was something that I was sort of told that I had to do. When we're making those big commitments to ourselves and it's our own responsibility and we are solely responsible for deciding, this is the direction I'm going, this is the step that I have decided is the next step that I'm going to take. If we're focused on the result, if we're externally focused, we're bringing with that external motives, and the fears, doubts, and worries come along with that. And, if we are able to, start within, if we're able to apply these, the framework that we've been talking about over the last few weeks to be able to, solidify what is most important to us, be able to develop and cultivate a mindset that enables us to be able to be aware of our emotions, positive, negative, if we're stepping out of the comfort zone It's not always going to be rosy. There will be some negative emotions that come up with that, but having an awareness of who we are, what we're feeling, managing our thoughts, if we're able to do this inner work first, then we're able to allow ourselves to step out of the comfort zone in an authentic way that is less reliant on what others are thinking or what the results are going to be. We're able to jump out of our comfort zone, embark on the activity or task, whatever it is, take the action that we've decided is the next step that we need to take, and keep an open mind and be curious about investigating whatever the results are. Good, bad, or indifferent, there's going to be lessons to be learned. This is not an easy path for us to travel. But I love the way that you just described that, Tyler. I think, even these milestones that we need to pass that do incorporate some external results. We will have milestones around being able to make a financially viable business. We're going to have targets that we're going to be hitting that are completely out of our control. And that's okay. I think, we can have those external targets, but we can approach, as much as possible, we can allow ourselves to take responsibility, take control, and be able to motivate ourselves intrinsically. Another good example that's coming up at the moment is, for a lot of coaches, there is a pressure on making, paying the bills. And I know from my own personal experience in the past, if we're moving away from focusing on what's most important to us, what's the next step that I need to take, trying to develop this empowered ability to be able to just commit to an action, take an action, get curious about the results. If we're moving away from that process to be purely focused on, I need a sale, I need a customer, I need someone to sign up to my offer. The second we start moving towards that extrinsic desire, I think that is the point where the doubts, worries, and fears get the better of us.
Great insight, Paul. And it's a really tricky thing to navigate through. And that's why, self-awareness is important, and having other people that are like-minded and have similar goals and interests. For example, other life coaches or a community of people aspiring to help and serve others is really essential to talk about these issues so that we can start to see ourselves and what is actually motivating us. Is it a positive thing, or is it actually a negative thing? And the tricky part is that a lot of this stuff, again, it's in the subconscious and even the unconscious. And, if all we're doing is looking outside of ourselves, then we're never really seeing ourselves. We're never really facing ourselves. And, that's the main message, is that we are the solution and we are the cause. And basically, we are worthy to have an experience, a fortunate, fulfilled life that we're grateful for.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm as interested as anyone who might be listening to this. I'm loving sort of making sense of this on the go as we're talking about this, Tyler. But again, what's coming up for me is that there are times where we have made commitments to other people. We might have work commitments, we've got family commitments, we've got social norms that we need to hold to. So we can't be just doing our own thing all the time. So there is a balance to be had. But I think the more that we can consciously think through how we want to go about doing the things that we need to do, the better served we're going to be, and the better served everyone else around us is going to be. And it really is about looking at our values in whole. Sometimes our values, there are some conflicts against different things that sort of pop up, and we need to sort of work out what the best way forward is for us. But if we're doing that from a conscious level, from a place of truly knowing ourselves, giving ourselves permission to be as authentic as we possibly can, then we can apply that directly to our coaching businesses. Because that is what this is all about. This is about allowing ourselves and giving ourselves permission to be at the level that we are, to be able to continue to work on gaining clarity on what that vision looks like, and to be able to continue this process of deciding what that next step is. For me, it's those 2 points. It's, the vision, what it is you want to create, and what we're going to do next. And growth is mostly going to come out of doing something different. And doing things different is not always going to be easy. But it is required for us to be able to make the progress that we're looking to make. And, I just keep coming back to the more that we can become aware of what's going on, to zoom out and just look at what is actually driving us to do the things that we are wanting to do. Is it for the right reasons? Is it in line with our purpose, our values, and our vision? Or are we doing some of the things that we do to get praise or approval, or to get everyone commenting on how clean and nice our house is looking?
Yeah, that's all ego driven.
Yes.
How we appear to others, because it's an external or extrinsic focus. How and really we're trying to portray ourselves in a particular light instead of understanding that who we are as we are is great, and embracing that greatness and allowing that intrinsic greatness to guide your feelings, thoughts, and actions, which is what you just spoke about. It's an interesting thing. And I was just going to add that, and I spoke about it a little bit earlier, but when you really are aligned with your vision and your mission, that's what empowers you to take care of the extrinsic responsibilities of day-to-day practical life, whether it's at your home or in your business, or, it doesn't matter what you're doing, because what you want is the intrinsic to be the cause and the extrinsic to be in alignment with that. That's the result. And that's what gives us the enthusiasm and the courage, because courage is required to face our fears.
I love that word, courage. I think that is such an important word to pause on just for a second, because I think the danger in all of this is, we mistake, this intrinsic motivation for just doing what we think is right, which isn't necessarily what is going to take us towards our vision. our desire to grow and to step away from what we currently already have. There is a potential to be able to use as an excuse, I guess, not stepping out of your comfort zone of, we can use the excuse of, well, I'm just doing what I feel is appropriate to be doing right now. I think we need to keep coming back to putting things into perspective, into thinking through the longer term objective here. We've got this plan, this vision, this desire to become or to create a successful business. And the only way that is going to become a reality is by taking steps in that direction. And, continuing to come back to that idea of, or checking into, right, this is the direction I need to be heading. What am I going to do today that's going to take me a step in that direction? And how can I do it from the most authentic, empowering, courageous way that I can possibly approach that today?
Fantastic. Yeah, well, we've done a bit of a deep dive here, Paul, on again, what is it that moves us to do what we do? Why do we do what we do, and why don't we do what we don't do?
That's probably a topic for another day, but it's the same logic. It's the same. Yeah. Whenever we catch ourselves not doing something that we know we should be, that decision to not do something at some level is meeting our needs. But is it a need that's actually going to take us in the direction we really want to be going? So I would, encourage everyone to just keep coming back to the idea of, becoming as aware as you possibly can, and just taking note of what the motivations are for the things that you're doing. So I think that's about all we've got time for today. Just a reminder, we do go live with these discussions twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. If anyone has any comments, questions, or feedback, we would love to hear your thoughts, and we'd love to hear from you. So please don't hesitate to reach out and start a conversation. Did you have anything to add before we take off, Tyler? There's a lot that I want to add, but I think my schedule is kind of forcing I've got an extrinsic motivation to wrap up here, but it's always great chatting with you, Paul. And I'm really excited to have communication with some of our listeners. And, if we could even get together and, in a Zoom meeting with some of our listeners, that would be great, to talk about some of these topics that we've been discussing a couple times a week. Absolutely. All right, guys, bye for now, and we'll be back again very soon.
Bye-bye.